you were a Bengali guy from Kolkata, but you're into like metal and emo music.
Yeah.
How does that happen? Because
it's funny. I grew up in Columbus, Ohio, and like the rock scene there is huge. And it was a huge part of like the culture that I was around. But it really kind of started in 5th grade. I had my 5th grade teacher, Mr. Hale, and he burned me a CD of the entire Ocean Avenue album by Yellowcard. And at that point, my dad like didn't want me listening to rock music for some reason. But so I used to sneak this CD. And then I went to India that summer, and my cousin showed me Iron Maiden, Linkin Park, Bullet for My Valentine, like all the OGs, and I just kind of fell in love when I was like 10, and it just went from there. It definitely appeals to like my nature. I feel like it's a very strong and like, and I love listening to it. I love playing it.
Mm-hmm. And so you picked up that type of music. How did you get entered in music? Like, what was your first instrument? Who introduced you to that actually creating?
Word. That's kind of a long. My parents pushed me into playing classical piano when I was like 3, and that was kind of the start of it. So they had me doing that from when I was like 3 to 16, and then in like 5th or 6th grade, I got a guitar, and then I got a drum set, and just kind of went from there. So my introduction into music was kind of from my parents, but in terms of like what made me want to go for it, I would say, honestly, I think the turning point was when my cousin showed me that music. Like it just, something clicked, and I remember driving around in the streets of India with my little like USB stick MP3 player, listening to Linkin Park, being like, this is it. Like this is like what I've been looking for, you know? And so I started my own bands around when I was 12 with some buddies of mine from middle school. And it kind of went from there. I think I played my first show when I was like 15 at the Alrose Villa in Columbus, Ohio. Shout out. I think they closed over the pandemic, which is tragic, but played my first show there. I specifically remember looking out. I'm playing like this Flying V Jackson guitar.
Wow.
Like, yeah, like literally like cut off attack shirt, full blown scene kid. And I remember looking out at the audience and seeing like 4 old dudes that I met at the bar, like 5 kids that were there for supporting other bands, and like my friends all with their arms around each other and just headbanging. And I was like, this is it. Like this is the only thing I'm gonna do.
So you're 12 years old and you're headbanging. What is your parents thinking?
Oh man, they did not like it. They did not like it. My dad definitely still has a pipe dream for me being like a concert classical pianist.
Really?
That's 100% like what he wanted me to do.
Mm-hmm. But you had, before you released this project and have come on your own, you were in the music industry before doing other stuff, right?
Yeah. So I went to college at Berkeley, and that kind of gave me a bit of a launch into the music industry. I would say that was I was in a band called Dreamer and Son. I was singing for the band, writing for the band, doing the thing. And that was my first real, like, that was my first tour. That was my first EP. We had CDs, we had the whole thing. That was really like the real, real world beginning of kind of all of this. And then that turned into my last band, which is called Roy Juno. Mm-hmm. And that was like playing my first major festival. That was...
So you guys have had success in your own right with that band as well?
In a certain sense, yeah. It wasn't... Bands are hard, and I've been very fortunate to play with some just assassin musicians, but the way that I work, and I'm a multi-instrumentalist, and the way that I write, it was kind of hard to find my footing in a band setting. But what we were able to do was really sick. It was the first song I put out with over 1 million streams, like first real tour. I had some kind of boots on the ground for a little bit, but I considered that side of my career as paying my dues. Mm-hmm. And
so what inspired your transition to go solo?
It kind of was always the goal. I was very fortunate to be with some really, really killer creatives, and just insane world-class musicians that are touring right now with huge artists and doing so. In that context, I was just like, I knew bands growing up. I knew the world of being in a band growing up and was around bands that made it. I watched 21 Pilots as a kid, like go from playing high schools in Westerville, Ohio to this. and it was amazing. But I think really at the end of the day, how do I want to put this? Like, I think the thing that made me want to go solo was that I'd grown up and always been around metal and rock and always made metal and rock. Mm-hmm. And I was ready to move on. I was ready to jump into really anything and more or less do whatever I want, genre-wise, sound-wise. And it just made sense. I mean, I was in Nashville before I came out here to LA doing the band thing. And it was a very, humbling and trying experience, but I learned a lot about what I want out of music and what I want out of my career. And the reality is, like, I just want to be able to make literally anything.
Yeah. And so when you speak on confidence, did like your childhood, maybe being Desi Parlay, a part of that?
Yeah, I mean, I grew up in Ohio, interesting environment to grow up as a first generation Desi kid. Mm-hmm. Lots of points where I feel like I could have used guidance that I didn't have any. Mm-hmm. Because there's no way to we're the first. Mm-hmm. There's no blueprint to kind of follow to figure out, hey, this is how you feel like you belong. Mm-hmm. It's just kind of like punching in the dark until it works. And I think a lot of my childhood was spent trying to figure out where I fit in. And that definitely resulted in a lack of confidence that I have that I found in music, really. Mm-hmm. I think that's why I gravitated towards it so much, because it really felt like somewhere that I belonged and something that I was supposed to be doing. Mm-hmm. And so that grew into now, which, now I feel like myself, you know what I mean? Like I'm this is it, this is what it is. Like,
well, you're at the forefront, essentially,
Dude, it's a crazy thing to think about. I mean, and I know we were trying to get her on the podcast too, but my sister is just absolutely crushing it with that and setting like a precedent for not only music, not only Indians in music, but our family.
Yeah.
Like it's so sick, man. Mm-hmm. Like
and for your parents to see you and your sister, who's Perovi, by the way, created like a huge song on TikTok originally about a year or 2 years ago, and now is on the Elvis soundtrack.
Dude,
right?
It's so out of control, man.
It's wild.
It's so out of control. She's such an amazing vocalist and such just a creative. She's such an amazing creative. I've watched her throughout the years. I mean, I feel like nobody's really seen her draw yet.
Yeah.
And it's like out of control. Mm-hmm. It's totally out of control. Like, and the whole thing. So I think for our parents, it's I never would have thought this is how everything was gonna like land.
Yeah.
But I mean, my parents are so doting and so,
because now that they see you guys like one, especially together, right? Both going on this venture.
Yeah. And
now they're like, well, tell me if I'm wrong. Like usually, at least if there's multiple siblings, one can be like the star, doctor, engineer, whatever you want to call it. Yeah. But you guys are like, nah, screw it. We're gonna both do music, and we're both gonna be really good at it, and it's paying off.
Man, I mean, there's so many aspects to this that I think about all the time, which is like, what if my parents didn't want me to go down the route? I think for me personally, it took Berkeley to really like be like, this is real,
Okay.
But once it became real, and once my parents really saw what I wanted to do, they were in my corner. They've been in my corner 100. I can't even begin to express how fortunate I've been to have the family that I have. Like it's actually out of control. Like they have. I literally wouldn't be anywhere.
Yeah. Are they creative by nature too, your parents?
But they didn't really get a chance to
Yep.
You know what I mean? They didn't really get a chance to go for it. And I find that throughout my family. I went back to India in 2019 for the first time since I was like 13.
Yeah.
For my cousin's wedding. And I remember we're sitting on the roof we're sitting on the terrace of this place, like one night after the reception. We're all getting drunk. There's an acoustic guitar going around. And every one of my cousins, even on the new side of the family, were like, if I could do this, I would.
Wow.
You know?
Well, you know what's wild about, I think, our culture specifically, we're deeply creative, musically, choreographically, visually, all the arts. But I think what stops a lot of people that we grew up with was the fact that, like, being a real person, having kids, having a family, that's so important. So we can flirt with it. We can flirt with being creative. But once we start looking at it as a career option, everyone around you goes, whoa, 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 slow down, right? Mm-hmm. But once you catch that drive, I think like you did, you caught that win and realized how much it meant to you and took it all the way and did it. I think people in the beginning are like, oh, are not sure. But now that they see what you're doing and your friends and family back home, like, we wish we could do that too. It takes bravery, I think, as a Desi person to go into music.
I genuinely believe I didn't have another choice. Like that, it
really?
Just, this is what it was going to be as soon as it clicked. There was no other option. And so for, and this is the other side of why I feel like I'm so fortunate and just happened to be in the right spot at the right time, in the right part of my family generation, in the right part of my parents making the decision to come to the U.S. Like all of these things that I had nothing to do with lined up in such a perfect way to allow myself to happen.
Yeah.
So for me, I feel like there's these shoes that I have to fill, that this level of like bravery, really, that my parents had, that my grandparents had, that my cousins have, that the entire thing, the entire lineage of my family, over and over again. You see this I don't know, this like entrepreneurial mindset.
Like a different form of bravery every generation.
Yeah. It's 100%. I mean, going down this route the way that it has been for me right now is 100% in my blood.